Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
All right, let's welcome everybody out today to episode 337 of I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name's Chris.
And my name's Chrissy. As always, we are recording right out of the Access co-working space right in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City.
Hey, make sure to hit that subscribe button on your smartphone, podcast player, however you're listening to this podcast, because we have a brand new episode each and every week where we take a few minutes to sit down with somebody and allow them to share their story, kind of what they're doing here in Salt Lake City. So if you subscribe to the podcast, which is absolutely free, you will not miss a single episode along the way.
Today on the podcast, we get to sit down with Jessica and Judy from Mean Mugs. We got to find out their story, how the two of them met and started making mugs for some local companies. They make mugs for Black Rifle Coffee, Fisher Brewery, and even our friend Margaret Schlachter over at Dirt in Your Skirt podcast just made some mugs with them. These girls, I love them. I love these women.
They have a great story.
They totally do. And, you know, I have a little soft spot because they're also both kind of from the Midwest.
And if you're listening to this podcast before August 10th, 11th, or 12th, Mean Mugs, they're going to actually be doing some demos at Craft Lake City, which is one of my favorite events over the summer. And so you're going to want to make sure to go check them out.
Absolutely.
Hey, but before we jump into this interview, let's give some quick love to our sponsors for this episode. We have Five Wives Vodka, Product Power Up, and Market Source Real Estate. We're going to be telling you more about them a little bit later on in the podcast.
Hey, Chris, let's talk about the farmers market for a little bit. If you've never had a chance to visit the downtown Salt Lake City Farmers Market, you need to do yourself a favor and go check it out. It happens every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., all the way until October 20th. They have tons of local artisans that are making some really cool things, and the local farmers selling some of the most delicious produce you will ever taste. We're going to be there a handful of Saturdays through the season, so make sure you're connected with us on social media to find out more information.
All right, let's get into that conversation that we had with Judy and Jessica from Mean Mugs as they came into our podcast studio to share their story. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy. Where did you grow up? Since there's two of you, it's been a while since we've had four people on here.
Yeah.
Usually we have three, so that's a good thing. It's fun. I like to have it when there's four people because we can get a good conversation. I don't know, which one of you want to go first? Do you want to go first, Jessica?
Sure, I'll go first.
Where are you from Utah?
I'm not from Utah. I grew up in Minnesota in a small farming town just 45 minutes northwest of Minneapolis and spent most of my adult life in Minneapolis. And I owned a little house in the north side and worked downtown. And then when I was 33, I moved to Utah.
Wow, so you're
7 years ago.
That's right. Now I remember when we came and visited. Would you call it a shop or what exactly is it? What do you call it? A warehouse, I guess.
Our shop is a warehouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
When we came and visited there, we found out you were from Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we both have family from Minnesota, so we were just peas in a pod.
What brought you to Utah then?
Well, my husband and I are pretty antsy, I guess, sometimes. And before our daughter was born, we spent 6 months traveling, and we were with the full intent that we were going to actually live abroad. And then came back to Minnesota. We hadn't really cut any of the ties. We still had jobs. I mean, the economy was really pretty well. This was in 2007 and 2008. So our companies gave us sabbaticals, as you could say, and then we came back, we had jobs, life got comfortable again, and then we had our daughter, and it was just not as logistically easy to move abroad, and so we moved to Utah.
Kids will do that to you, right?
Yeah, they kind of ground you pretty fast.
Yeah.
We had my first kid 9 months ago, and that changed my life. You know, even it's just not as easy to do everything you want to do, but you figure out how to do something.
Right.
Now, what about you, Judy? Where are you from?
Well, I was born in a suburb of Chicago, Oak Park, and my mom and dad moved to North Dakota. And actually, my dad was from a farm in North Dakota, went to Minot State Teachers College, and that's where he met my mom. And then they moved to Chicago. I was the second one born in a family of 7 kids. And after we were in Chicago for a while, we moved back to North Dakota, and we were there until I was 13 or 14. We moved to Denver, Colorado. My dad was a music teacher, so we moved to, do the music thing for him. From Denver, we came to Utah in 1965, and Dad had a teaching job in Mount Pleasant, Utah, at a little school called Wasatch Academy. And so I went to high school there, graduated in 1970, and then went to Weber State for a while, and then I went to Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture. And I spent most of the time at the architectural school in the pottery studio. So after a year, I left and moved to Washington, D.C., and worked in a flower shop and found a pottery shop that I could apprentice in. And I actually discovered the potter's wheel when I was 14 at Wasatch Academy, and I have never been without a potter's wheel since.
It's just kind of fun to find out where people, we're not all... One thing I find about Utah is very few people were born and raised here. We've all migrated here. Yeah, Chrissy is from Wisconsin, and then I'm originally from California, but I've lived in Utah for so long.
Yeah, me too.
25 years ago,
after a while,
the family
you just have to
moved
accept
here.
that you're Utahn.
And,
Yeah.
Now, how did the two of you meet, right? Is that okay? Can we jump right into
let's
that,
do it.
Chrissy? I want to figure out this story.
Sure. Do you want me to? Okay. I moved here for a job, and so I worked. It was kind of a stressful job, and so I was looking for an outlet. I've always been a potter, or my first pottery class was the first thing I remember making out of pottery was like in kindergarten. So I've always been in love with it. And when I was in grad school, my husband bought me a wheel, and I put it in the basement, and that's how I learned really, and then traveled and learned. But I got here, and my house wasn't big enough to have a studio, and there are very few outlets for it. And so I found this studio in town and started teaching there to help them out. It was a new studio, and Judy started teaching there shortly thereafter, and that was how we met, was just through this outlet. And so I taught a couple days a month, sometimes once a week, but just as a way to keep my hands in clay.
Now, you both mentioned you love pottery. What is it about it that you love? There's got to be something, or is it something that you can't really pinpoint?
I think I can kind of pinpoint, but I think because it's, for me, I discovered the potter's wheel at age 14, but I was always digging in the garden and planting flowers, and I loved the feeling of the earth in my hands. So when I discovered the potter's wheel, it was just a natural. And I think pottery is, you're working with earth elements, and that's just awesome to feel that move through your hands. It's sensuous. It's that you can learn so much from the different clays, the different elements that make glazes. It's endless. I've been doing it for so long, but there's never a time when I don't feel that I have something to learn. There's always something to learn.
So cool.
Yeah.
It feels like I did it a little bit as a teenager. I thought I was going to super go into pottery. And it was always like the feeling of just being able to play in the mud.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, because didn't you have a wheel in the whole 9 yards, Chrissy?
Yeah, I did. Well,
was that here? No.
No. Just growing up, I had a wheel.
Yeah.
But nothing, I never made anything nice.
And I've never had, I made like an ashtray for my mom, and then my heart was broken because she didn't smoke. So it was like,
Hey, if you love your kid, you will pick up a habit for
Yeah,
them.
right.
Doesn't like every kid make the clay ashtray as like a gift, right?
And mugs.
Yeah, mugs.
Or pencil holders.
Pinch pots are the big one.
You're like, please drink out of this. And you're like, no, it'll leak out of here. But
There's 5 holes in the bottom.
So Mean Mugs, though, this is it's a fairly new company or business, right? Like it hasn't been around forever.
Right. A year and a half.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
So is that all the length of time you've really known each other then?
We've known each other for a couple years, maybe 3 years.
I think 4, probably 4. I think the time flies when you're having a good time.
Yeah. But yeah, it just sort of developed out of that. And I'll let Judy tell the story on how the company started.
Yeah, because it's so fascinating. And for listeners, we'll probably mention in the intro, Chrissy, that we visited you, so we got to see a little bit behind the scenes. But we're here today. Let's find this story out of Mean Mugs.
Sure.
Well, my son was working for a coffee company, a well-known one here in Salt Lake City now, and they are a veteran-owned company, and so they had ordered mugs like that were coming from China, and a lot of veterans had said, why don't you get some made in the USA mugs? So my son said, well, my mom's a potter. Why don't we have her make some mugs? And so they ordered 50, and it took me a couple of months to get 50 on my own, and I delivered them, and they sold within 48 hours, and so they ordered 100, and took me a while to get those out, and they sold again in less than a week, probably another 48 hours. And then I kept hiring, people who I knew were potters to help out to try to keep up with production. And then when I found out that Jessica had left the city and she, was at the pottery studio with me, then I said, hey, Jessica, what do you think about going into business with me? Because I can't keep up. I'm a potter. I'm not a business person. I knew that she was. So that was, the beginning of, and that was in, what was that,
2016, I think.
Were you hand throwing every mug?
Yes.
Wow, that is a ton of work.
Yeah.
Were you doing this a lot? Like for your son to ask you, obviously you were doing mugs of some quality.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you've done it for over 50 years, and I hate to admit that.
Yeah, but were you selling them at all? Or entering them to the fair? I don't know. What do you do with...
Well, I guess I just, by word of mouth, I sold my artwork. And I lived in Big Cottonwood Canyon. And so Silver Fork had ordered from me. And a lot of my work that I did was commission. And so I sold not just mugs, but I sold huge hand-built pieces to people and hand-carved. And so this is kind of a more simplistic version. What I like about the mugs is I don't have to try to be too creative sometimes, because sometimes like a blank piece of paper or a blank piece of clay kind of freaks me out, even though I'm excited that I'm kind of like a little kid. I don't want to mess up. And so when I know I have 1.5 pounds of clay and I'm going to make a mug, it excites me because I already know ahead of time. But each one is an individual mug. So even though it's a mug is a mug is a mug, each one is hand thrown. And to try to get them all to a standard size and form, I never thought I'd be a production potter, but I really like the meditation of it. I like the centering of it, the pulling up of the clay, which is more like a meditation to me now than I ever thought it would be.
Now, I just remembered we had Clark Marshall. Isn't
yeah,
it?
yep.
Do you guys know Clark, CM Ceramics? Isn't that? I mean, that's the same thing.
It
right?
is. I was actually kind of wondering, like, you guys have you do kind of the same thing, but you went completely different ways with it. He does a lot of artisan
like plates
dishware
and stuff for the
plates.
big fancy restaurants around town.
But it's really cool because you guys each both took your own spin on it. What made you just like really decide I'm just going to do mugs? Like, have you ever thought about doing plates or bowls or whole sets?
Yeah, we have. I think because this coffee company that we worked with, their orders it really consumed our first year, which we're grateful for. It helped us fine tune a lot of things. And I think at some point, we thought we'd like to get into plates and bowls and dish sets. In fact, Jessica I think someone had approached her early on, and we have just been trying to fine tune our processes, getting all of our glazes right to match, or because of the chemistry, your glazes have to match and marry very well to the clay body you use. So to eliminate a lot of loss, you have to have the chemistry down. And that includes the firing. So we're working with the elements, and each one affects the other. Even the atmospheric pressure will change the consistency of the glazes on any given day. So we have to fine-tune those things before we do, I think we're almost to that point now, don't you think, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, the R&D that goes into this, because it's sort of mid-level production, we really had to take the process really seriously. We kind of are a step step up. I mean, not a step better, but just a step faster or bigger than just individually throwing all of the mugs that you might see at an art fair or something like that.
Right.
Because of the volume.
Yeah.
And so whenever you go into volume with anything, your success rate can increase, but so can your rate of failure. Mm-hmm. And your failures are often, and you just get used to it, and you try to work through all of those kinks as you go. And so most of the last year and a half, we really spent the time tweaking our process, becoming better potters, hiring better people, and investing in our equipment. And we've purchased equipment that can help speed up our process. And with that is also included a whole other set of questions we need to have answered and learn. Like we had to learn about this new equipment, and we had to hire people and train those people so that when we need to make a mold, for instance, for a pressed mug, we can do that in a cost-effective way. Mm-hmm. And so mugs were really the way to do that because, A, we had clients, we had the orders. Yeah, we had the demand. So, we were able to kind of test the water that way. And as we now we're into our second year, we are starting to think about those other things and just keeping things simple. Because as soon as you overcreate or you get too far off track, it can really put a wrench in your production and your finances. It's a really expensive business to get into initially because of all the overhead costs.
I could imagine.
Yeah. And you do all of the glazes. You create them.
Right.
From scratch, basically, right?
Yep.
So how did you even get into how did you even know what to do?
Our business is, I think, DIY at its finest.
Yeah.
We started to realize that we couldn't really rely on the marketplace to get us what we wanted and needed because of the failure rate. I mean, almost any place you fire in the U.S. is going to be different. And the gas chambers and how the gas reacts to the atmosphere and where you get your clays from. So all of those things are variables that kind of play into the process. And with glaze, if you're getting it from someone, they're giving you the same glaze they're giving everyone else, and it may or may not work with your clay or your atmosphere or your machinery. And we found that to be true almost immediately. After spending lots and lots of money ordering glazes from people, we realized it just wasn't working. And I had done some of my own glaze chemistry way back when, just for fun, and so I knew where to look for information. I didn't necessarily know how to do it. I tend to be pretty decent at math sometimes. And so I just decided that we were going to invest in some of the materials and go for it. And I've had some success and some failure.
And fortunately, since this is a very ancient process, there are glazes out there that are standards that you can take a base and then just change your color and the amount of element. And what Jessica's been doing is getting a rainbow of colors, and then we pick from that. But fortunately, there are base glazes out there that people have shared those formulas, and we can take those then and then tweak it to the coloring that we want and need, and to formulate with our clays. Yeah. So
that's so wild.
Glaze is just crushed rock, really. So you're not working with a painter's palette, so it makes it a little bit more difficult when you're putting.
You use a lot of different elements too, right? It's not just rock. Like you have to mix
oxides and
So it's like science, right?
It's chemistry. It's chemistry.
It's like what you want to do as a kid.
Bad or something,
totally.
Right?
Breaking Bad, but not illegal.
And then sometimes you'll mix up a recipe and you'll put it on we have to test everything, even when we mix a new batch of glaze that we've used 100 times. We have to test it every single time we mix a new batch because it'll just be different.
That's so wild.
Well, when you're working with all these natural elements, it's probably really hard to get consistency all the time. Do you just run with it though if something kind of works a little bit differently, or you're like, well, this batch is just going to be slightly more green?
Yes.
Or,
yes.
And absolutely. We put disclaimers. The people who order from us, they know that in our production policy, we have to be that way. Otherwise, we would lose too much. And so there's always, and actually any production pottery that if you go and look at their term sheets, it's always color will vary, size will vary, because it's impossible unless you're a huge manufacturer, and even then you're going to have variation in color just because of the fire.
That's even boring. Half of the fun of buying the custom mugs that you guys make is the fact that each one is completely original, and completely handcrafted. So I think it would be boring if they all turned out exactly the same.
We think so too.
Yeah.
We like it that way.
I mean, there's always a place for those who want, a less expensive mug that they, is their go-to.
Walmart.
But
a nice souvenir mug, right?
Yeah,
from
Disneyland.
Yeah, Disneyland.
But I think that when you put a handcrafted mug in your hand and you drink whatever you drink, coffee or tea or soda or anything else, there's a feeling of, I think one of the things in the beginning when we started this company was that we wanted our mugs, when people pick it up, that will be their go-to mug, that is what brings them home, what brings them calm, brings them their cup of coffee in the morning or whatever it is, that it becomes a ritual, and so that Mean Mugs came out of that, mugs with meaning, that whatever your meaning is, we want you to feel it and to have it be with you when you pick up that mug. So it has
somebody
a meaning.
Was asking
I
what
was
the
wondering,
name
well, I'm
meant.
like, Mean Mugs, it sounds so badass.
Yeah, right?
Because that could mean a few different things. And I just realized it doesn't mean mean mugs. They're not angry.
Sometimes. But not all the time.
I mean, we've had a few hit the wall, when they come crashing out. But that you're right, that
That's
it's the meaning, whatever it is for you. We want to support you in your meaning for life, and your meaning what you get up in the morning to do every day.
We need to actually take a quick break here to play a message from our sponsor. So hang tight. We'll be back. We got some more questions right after this message. All right, Chrissy, it's that time of the podcast where we talk about our sponsors. These are some great local businesses that are helping support the podcast. So when you, the listener, support them, you're supporting the podcast. Hey, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by Market Source Real Estate.
If you guys love the charm and character of older homes like I do, you need to contact our good friends Monique and Jeremy Higginson of Market Source Real Estate.
For the past 17 years, they've been specializing in helping people buy and sell homes in Sugar House in the greater Salt Lake City area.
And you really can't find better people to help you find a house in those areas. They have a background of flipping houses, and they've owned almost 24 homes themselves, so they know all the ins and outs of older homes.
If you're looking to sell your home, Market Source Real Estate specializes in helping sellers update or repair their homes to increase their value and make you more money.
If you're looking to buy an old home, they know exactly what to look for so you don't end up buying a money pit. You can find their info at thinksaltlakecity.com today or call 801-810-6773.
And one more time, that website is thinksaltlakecity.com or their phone number is 801-810-6773. And you know what? If for some reason you didn't write that down, we're going to have that with the show notes of this episode. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Product Power Up. This is the best and biggest conference that is geared solely to product people and the companies they create. And guess what? It's back and it's ready to put on a great show here in 2018. Product Power Up is happening, write this down, September 20th and the 21st at the Mountain America Expo Center, located at 9575 South State Street in Sandy. Product Power Up is put on in partnership by the guys at Blacksmith International and FiberFix. These guys got together and decided that enough was enough, that there was simply no community that catered to non-technical founders of product companies, so they decided to make one. This event is for anyone who identifies as a product person. It is not just another tech conference. It is not a simple networking event. It is not simply an entrepreneur event. It is 2 days of incredible content from some of the top product pros in the business, along with great networking opportunities and product showcases. If you have launched a product, if you have worked with product, buy product, sell product, or anything else related to products, you need to plan on being here.
I love the idea of this because I swear we've all had those moments where we have an amazing product idea and you don't really know where to go or how to start. So this is a great place for people like me who want to do something like that to go.
Head on over to their website, productpowerup.com. This is where you can purchase tickets. You can see who's speaking. You can see the panelists. Or if you just want to find out more information about this incredible 2-day event happening September 20th and the 21st at the Mountain America Expo Center. Again, that website, productpowerup.com. And of course, many thanks to Product Power Up for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by our friends at Five Wives Vodka. You know, if you're in Texas, drink Tito's, but if you're here in Utah, you drink Five Wives Vodka. So the next time you're at your local bar, ask for Five Wives Vodka. If you're at your state liquor store, ask for Five Wives Vodka. They actually have 3 different flavors Chrissy and I are going to tell you a little bit about. I just recently found out that the original flavor is Chrissy's favorite, so I want her to tell us about it.
It is my favorite. It's so versatile. The original Five Wives vodka is made from Utah mountain spring water. It's 100% distilled corn spirit and it's gluten-free. The spring hidden in beautiful Ogden Canyon is inaccessible by vehicle, so the water is hiked out 5 gallons at a time. And you know why this is such a great one? Because I can come home, make a LaCroix boy with it, that's a lime-flavored delicious drink, or make a really cool Bloody Mary with Amy's Home Cookin' local Bloody Mary mix.
They also have the Five Wives Sinful. This is great for like just shooting. It's a flavored vodka with a delicious cinnamon taste. Unlike all those other cinnamon products that give you that cinnamon candy taste, Sinful is like a morning cinnamon roll with only 76 calories per ounce.
There's also the Five Wives Heavenly, which is a flavored vodka with a delicious vanilla taste. Heavenly's rich buttery vanilla flavor comes through without coating your taste buds with sugar, and this results in more vanilla and less calories.
Head on over to fivewivesvodka.com. This is where you can find out more about them. There's recipes up there, all that good stuff. Or like I said, if you're at a bar, you're hanging out with your buddies, ask for Five Wives Vodka by name. If you go to the state liquor store, pick up a bottle of Five Wives Vodka. They also make a great gift for a birthday or if you're heading over for a barbecue at a buddy's. And many thanks to Five Wives Vodka for sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
Have you had any challenges with Mean Mugs being a women-owned company? I know that's kind of a silly question, but sometimes
it's a good question.
There's obstacles for some reason.
There are a lot of obstacles. Yeah, we have. I think the biggest challenge is getting people to respect us as being manufacturers. Mm-hmm. This is a boys' club.
You think life is a boys' club?
I think in some senses, yes. But I think in Utah, there's another element that maybe I don't really know how to explain. But things like you can't always trust people right away. Or you do trust people and then you realize, ooh, I shouldn't have trusted them. You know, there's just things that happen. You have to change the way you communicate just to get taken seriously.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, we're working through it. And it doesn't hinder what we're doing. And in manufacturing in Utah, yes, we have a lot of judgments probably being cast on us quite a bit on whether or not we know what we're doing and whether or not we're going to be successful. And, you know, so there's all sorts of things that I'm sure are floating around in conversations we haven't even been privy to, but we'd certainly feel it when we're doing business with people.
Now, working with clay, you mentioned, how sometimes it's like in your hair or something all over, right? I mean, how do you keep yourself in your car? I mean, do you just drag it home with you?
Yes.
I mean, do you get hosed off when you get home?
Yes.
Or what?
It looks awesome all
the
time.
I would just imagine that would be just the messiest
It's really
product
messy.
to deal with.
It is.
Gosh.
Don't you just love it though?
I do
Yes.
love it.
Oh man,
Yeah.
I would love it. I would love just having clay all over.
Now, what are who are some of the companies? I mean, I know you work with some great companies here in Utah. When we came and visited your shop, Dirt in Your Skirt podcast.
Yes, Margaret's been amazing.
She's the one who introduced us to the two of you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yes, thank you, Margaret.
And I mean, that's the beauty of Salt Lake City. I mean, so you did some mugs for her. Mm-hmm. Who are a couple? I mean, because I know you have some mentionable names.
Fisher Brewery.
Fisher Brewery.
Yeah, they're awesome.
So if people go into Fisher Brewery, do you think
I think they're sold out, and
they need to buy some more?
Yeah, we probably just need to contact. They're busy.
Yep.
And then Park Cafe.
That's right.
Sean, we're working with him, and then our very first client was Black Rifle.
Which I find is so amazing.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, a lot of us have seen like their Facebook ads. And
Right,
I mean, they're
right.
just a fun company. I
They
guess.
are amazing. They really are amazing.
Well, you make the grenade mugs, right, for them?
Yes.
Yeah. So cool.
Yes.
We posted them on Facebook, I think
Yeah,
it was.
yeah.
I'll try to refine those pictures up and put them with this episode. Fascinating. It blew me away. I mean, how many mugs do you make total, like in a day, a week? I mean, what are some numbers we could talk about here?
We can do, it's hard to say. It depends on the order, but we'll do 300, 400 mugs a week during sometimes even more around Christmas time and the holidays. We're pumping them out pretty quick. The grenades are a lot more time sensitive. I should say they just take a lot more time. So they're labor intensive. And so we really try not to speed that process up with them because it's just tough. They're all hand thrown. They're all hand carved. Every piece of those mugs are hand done. Not that everything in our shop isn't all hand done, but those in particular have a lot of detail.
Yeah, a lot of
The logos are hand rolled. The handles are hand pulled and attached separately. So
Yeah.
those are, and we tried to do a process that we thought would speed it up, but it really didn't. And it's just better to hand throw those. And we've gotten pretty good at it.
We've gotten good. For a while, too, we had other people working for us, and it was really hard. A lot of potters love to put their own shapes into things and their own details. And so it was hard to wrangle everyone in and make sure that they were all at least representing the same shape. And now there's 3 of us that it's pretty stable. But
That would be tough. Well, I mean, because half the fun is being an artist and creating, and
Right.
I'm sure everybody who came to the table wanted to bring a little bit of themselves.
yes.
That would be really tough.
Well, and it was piecework at the time. Now we've actually hired people as regular employees, so they're not necessary. And I don't know if there's something to this or not, but I'm going to assume there is. When we were paying piecework, which just means we would hire contractors to come in and pay them per mug, they were throwing as fast as they could. And throwing is the term that we use when using the pottery wheel. We're throwing a mug on the wheel. It's not actually throwing a mug against the wall. But, they were getting paid per piece. So that, the faster they could get through the process, the more money they would make. And what we ended up doing is tossing sometimes
of the
half
shapes.
of the products out. And so
So you probably had some real quality control.
we
huh?
had some quality control issues, and that was tough. So we've changed the way that we do things quite a bit in the last year and a half.
So with that being said, I was going to ask, like, what do you know now that you wished you would have started in the beginning? Would it be something with that, or what do you wish you would have known in the beginning of all of this?
Had I known what I know now, I probably would have run for the hills. But
Exactly.
no, I mean, I love it. I think there's just so much to it. And I think the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And the more it makes me want to be, I can be invigorated by one color in a glaze book or one part on a kiln. And all of those things we've had to learn because we don't have this was sort of low budget startup. We didn't take on we didn't have a whole lot of capital investment outside of what we put in ourselves. And so, we've had to learn every bit of the process, including fixing our own kilns. We're down there pulling gas chain things apart and with help, but these are things I didn't have skills in. And so I guess I wish I would have known that I needed to learn all those things and instead of having to learn those things on the fly. But I don't know if those things can really be taught. I think you just have to jump in and go.
Yeah. I think I would have run for the hills. Although I had fun in the beginning in those first, and it was so refreshing and exciting when the mugs would sell out really quick, and so you get it, and it's like Christmas, and then you get to give it away, and then you get to make some more and give it away again. I think the hardest thing is that it's so labor intensive, and the equipment that we use is not cheap. And so people are used to a China mug that, costs, $3 or $4 and can turn around and sell it for 10 or 12. We don't have the luxury because, for instance, the grenade, the hands-on from start to finish is an hour and 15 minutes. And that's if everything goes well. And
how long is it typically, you said if everything goes well. I'm sure quite often it doesn't.
Well, and there
Hour
are
and a half,
times,
hour 40?
Yeah, and there are some times when you just have a loss. So when you have a kiln that something happens in the kiln, either it fired too hot for whatever reason in the atmosphere, so you might lose 10 to 20% of your grenades. Well, you can't do anything with that. That's 20 hours of work that can't be recovered. So, people wonder, why are they so expensive? They cost so much because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so I think we'd like to be able to offer a mug for a lot cheaper but if people knew the process, and you guys saw some of that when you were in the shop.
It's so intensive.
Yeah. I mean, that where we try to make it affordable, sometimes we just can't cut corners. And when we do, we lose product. And when we lose product, we lose time, we lose material. So that's, I think, the hardest lesson, over the last year and a half, is that we just have to dive in and do our very best and not push corners to try to make it go faster, because it takes in the drying process, you can't rush that. If you're rushing and you're putting a handle and a logo on and you rush that, the handle falls off and the logo falls off. It just takes the time that it takes. And I think that's probably the thing that I didn't have a reality check on. I did, but I wasn't conscious of it. So now it's, how do we speed things up without detracting from the outcome in the end? We need for it to be a quality product and want it to be that coming out of our shop. So that's the hardest thing, I think, for me, was just realizing the time and the materials all coming together. And there's nothing really you can change about that, except we get faster. Like, we have this incredible employee, Avery Morgan, and she has learned how to handle and do logos like nobody's business. That girl, and she's only 19, and we're so incredibly thrilled to have her, because if I knew what I knew at 19, what she knows now, I shuddered to think how smart I'd be at 66 now.
Yeah, she's pretty amazing.
She's amazing. We love her.
It sounds, I mean, gosh, it's the amount of work you have to put into this. I mean, you're not rolling in the dough here. I mean,
right.
Get rich quick scheme.
Yeah,
no,
it definitely. Finding all this out, it makes, when I see your mugs, I see a completely different thing. I see a much more piece of art, like it should be. And if anything, you should be charging double.
Oh, yeah. Well.
I mean, I know it's probably tougher to get double out of it.
Yeah. We had to equate everything we do. We have to figure out, because we sell wholesale. I mean, spending time at art shows is fun, but I like to be shopping at art shows. We are going to be doing a local show this year at Craft Lake City, which I love, more so we can demo how these are made and do some things like that. But our time really needs to be spent in the shop. And we have to come up with price points for our products and a process that works for those price points, so that people can essentially, they can actually go and sell these retail. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be a middleman, and it's necessary. Because our mugs are branded, we're selling mugs for other people. They have other companies' meanings wrapped up into our handiwork, and that's the way we want it. And so, yeah, it's a careful calculation. We're certainly not rolling in it, but it's worthy work. 100 years ago, you had a potter, you had a tailor, you had a grocer, you had the essential services on your street, in your neighborhood, that you could walk to and get things made. And people, I think, had a very different relationship with their things. Maybe you only had 3 or 4 pairs of pants, and those were the same pants that you would wear all season, and a couple shirts. And all the old houses in the cities, they have small closets for that reason. People didn't have what they have now. They didn't need it. They had a relationship with their things. They bought good things if they could afford it, or they would save for those things and buy what they needed, and then they would use those things. And I feel like we want to do the same. It's that notion that we want to capture with our mugs. They speak to pop culture. So if you really love that cafe you go to and they happen to have a really awesome handmade mug, you're going to really love that mug. And going back to the question you asked about what I, wish I would have known, I think one of the most delightful things that I've learned that I didn't realize going into this was that people really have an emotional connection to these mugs, which makes us want to do even better and make them even more detailed, because they pick them up and they're like, these are so amazing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just looked at so many of them. Are they really that? And yes, we do put a lot of time and work into them, and it makes us want to be better, but we don't always feel that way,
right? Because you're just busy pushing a lot of them out.
We're making them, and we work with the client to make them the best we can. But then when somebody, comments on Instagram, or I hear someone feedback from a retailer, and they're like, "Wow, people just love these," and that just feels really good. If it makes it worth it. Like, okay, there's a slice of the Americana marketplace that is for us, that we can fit into, and hopefully make a really thriving business.
You know what I kind of like, the feeling that the reason I want one of these mugs is because when you're an adult, it's not okay to have like a blankie. You have that ritual, you have that thing that you love.
What are you talking about? I have a blankie.
Oh, I mean, it's totally fine. Wink, wink. But this is something that as adults, it's kind of like our blanket. You find this one mug that you love, and
for
you want
that
to drink
cup of coffee in the morning, man.
I mean, we have that at home. We're like, I want this mug. I only want to drink out of this mug. And it's a very personal connection.
Do you get mad when we have a Mary Poppins mug, and I feel like she gets mad every time I take it.
I have a Mary Poppins mug. Given to me.
It's a nice
and you share it.
mug.
I never get a drink out of it because he always gets up earlier than me. So I guess I deserve that.
We'll get up earlier. But now how can people, let's kind of, before I forget to ask, you take orders, right? So people listening want to, like, we thought it'd be cool to make some I Am Salt Lake mugs, or There's Dirt in Your Skirt, or Black Rifle, or Fish, or whatever. If a local business wants to have you make mugs for them, is there an easy way to explain this process, or what's the best way to reach out, I guess?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a fairly, I don't want the process to sound intimidating. When we do custom mugs, we do have to set people up with their logo. Sure. And that's kind of the scariest part, I think, for people, because they're like, whoa, now I'm committed.
It's an investment.
It's a small investment just to get the stamps printed. And then from there, I mean, essentially all someone has to do is reach out to us, and they can do that via email, info@meanmugspottery.com. And then we can kind of walk through the process. And we do have a scale of price ranges based on detail. So we try to keep it really reasonable and attainable for the small business community to get into that. And then we have, we have a couple different, like I said, price points, product sizes, detail, quantity, all of that stuff.
Where would they reach you? Like an email? What's your email? I'll have you say it again, but what's your email right now?
The email is info@meanmugspottery, all spelled out one word, .com.
And there'll be pictures at iamsaltlake.com with this. And on that same note, they don't need to live in Utah either, right? You guys could ship.
We ship
to people, which I find fascinating. I shipped a mug one time and it broke.
Yeah, that's been a whole process too. The packaging,
learning how to package.
Yeah, and we've actually just started partnering with a local nonprofit called The Other Side Academy, and they are packaging our products for us now.
What is the others? I mean, just a little plug for them.
So they, I believe, have a sort of an interim prison to workforce.
That's cool.
Project. Yeah. So they help folks that are coming out of prison with skills, and they help run these companies.
So they're packaging it up. And
packaging.
Okay.
Yeah. And they've been so great. They pick the stuff up for us. They package it, and then we've invested in some packaging that we, of course, ensure that there's dividers and all sorts of stuff that goes into it. But yes, we can ship all over the United.
How much are you shipping there? I mean, because I would imagine most of these are just hand delivering locally, aren't you? Or are you actually shipping quite a bit of it?
We ship quite a bit. We in fact, when Jessica was talking about some of the excitement and fulfillment of this, our mug making, we had a client, and actually still is a client, in Florida, and he has 2 businesses that we made mugs for, Bean Tree Pediatrics, his wife's business, and then Morning Wood Furniture. And so he had 2 sets of mugs, and then he has a nonprofit, the Brady Project, which is a fundraiser for a young child who died of a very rare disease, and I don't know the name of that disease. But anyway, so he ordered those 3 different mugs, and we delivered those, had them delivered in May to Florida. And he found us. I was very reluctant to put a web page out, and because we were so busy our first year figuring things out, doing things. But once we put our website up and our Facebook page, this fellow, his name's Arlo, he found us, and he has been collecting our mugs since the very beginning. He has when I first made them, they were all limited edition. And so he has one of the first lots, the 10th mug. And so he was very excited when he finally found us so that we could create mugs for him. But
now he collected from the businesses that you were making it
yes,
from? Yes.
Uh-huh. And so
he made it his mission to find you guys.
Yeah.
And continue to order some.
And he tried a couple of times, and then he finally... He said, okay, I'm going to try one more time. And I think that's when our Facebook page went up last year. And so he contacted us and was so excited. And that's the beauty of when we meet these people and we're able to make a mug for them and they're excited, that keeps us working into the night with joy.
Do you work a lot of long hours? Are you there early in the morning, late at night? Late
at night. I think sometimes it feels like it's 24/7 because we go home and we kind of eat, drink, and dream. Mugs, fortunately or unfortunately, but because Jessica and I wear many hats with doing the accounting, the billing, the creation, the logo on Illustrator, we just seem like we never stop, and it's hard to find somebody who really is dedicated to pottery who can wear all those hats.
Well, hopefully I didn't pull you away from a big order tonight.
No, we're good. We're good. We've planned
podcast.
for this. I'm actually going out of town tomorrow.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
Do you care to say where you're going?
I'm just going south. I'm bringing I'm bringing 2 8-year-olds, one 8-year-old and one 9-year-old camping. So I'm not sure how relaxing it'll be.
So
but
you
it's going to be
fun.
Be
really excited to get back and start working.
I might. Yeah. But I will be bringing my work with me. I do a lot of research and reading and things like that. But
that's usually another question we ask is when you're not busy making mugs, what are some of your other hobbies and interests? We always like to find a little bit more out about the people we bring on the show.
Yeah, sure. I love yoga. I do a lot of yoga.
A lot of yoga, camping.
We do a lot of camping, a lot of hiking. I love biking. I like to be outside.
I like to be outside. I like to bike. And I just bought the sweetest little teardrop camper so I can put my kayak on the top of the car. I can hook up my little teardrop camper and my bicycle rack on the back of the camper and head for the hills. So
I saw your camper on Facebook and I just wanted to go move in.
I know.
It is so cute.
It's my little gypsy wagon.
It's the best. It's so awesome.
A lot of people probably have no idea that your little doggie's with us. Remind me of the name.
This is Quinny. Her name? Quinny. And actually, we have a studio of dogs.
Yeah.
The dogs are welcome. In fact, they're part of our crew.
I love it.
Jessica's got Stanley.
Yeah.
And he's what kind of a dog? He's just the sweetest.
I call him my Sasquatch. He's a giant wire hair lab mix.
And you're going to try to bring him tonight, all right?
No, yeah. He's gotten old.
How many things has his tail broken?
He's pretty good because he's just generally, he just goes and lays down. He's 10 years old. He's got bad hips. So he doesn't move around too much. But the other dogs, they're smaller and they get excited and, they get the zoomies and they run around and, so stuff goes flying.
Down.
Yeah. Stop. Get out of the studio.
We've got a French, what is it? French bulldog?
There's a Frenchie.
I love a little French bulldog.
And a pit bull.
Who's
Walter.
French bulldog? Which one has the French bulldog?
It's neither of ours. The property managers actually have one, and he has 2, and the little Frenchie named Gus. And he's kind of a jerk. He pees on things and he takes sponges, but we love him.
But he's cute, right?
But he's cute.
Well, if you look on our Facebook page, I think there's a video of him. He was put on one of the potter's wheel and we just turned it on and it's going round and round and Gus is just sitting there or standing there on the potter's wheel.
I use jerk to say it's a term of endearment. We love him, but he sometimes is almost... He's like I don't know if I'd like him as a person because I think he would be just really naughty.
He's
he just
a little
does naughty
Napoleon.
things. He's inappropriate.
He's a little Napoleon.
He steals.
Yeah.
He pees on things. But we love him.
Yeah.
He bites
Yeah.
occasionally.
He bites. Yeah.
If you try to take the sponge from him, he'll bite you.
Yeah. And then there's Walt. He's a pity mix. Yeah, and he's awesome. So he'll sit by the overhead door and keep us safe. Nobody's going to
Guard
jump
you
in there, guards us
from the hobos, right?
Yeah, it can be kind of a precarious area. There's things that happen that you get a
Do you
really
see some
good
sketchy
education.
stuff over there? Like,
Not
'cause
as
you're right by the
much.
train tracks.
Yeah, we
to.
used to.
Yeah.
Last year was really bad. Last year was, we had a dead body in our parking lot.
No kidding.
Way.
A lot of needles and
A lot of
you guys
needles.
find it?
No, the property, Brandon, who manages
be
the building,
moving.
he called me and said, "Hey," and I was on my way in. He said, "Yeah, we found a guy." And he's like, anyway, I decided to go get a coffee before I came in so they could call. I didn't want to see it.
Coffee
so
always
the
wins.
tent was still there in the parking lot when I got to work, and I didn't know that there had been a body there. And somebody came up and said, "Hey, what's with the tent?" Oh, I guess no. Brandon had texted me and said there had been a dead body, but it was already gone. But the tent was still there, and this guy came by on a bicycle and he said, "Hey, what's with the tent?" And I said, "Oh well, the guy passed away. He died this morning." And about an hour later, that guy came back with a crew of people, and that tent was gone.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they kind of claimed it right then.
Oh, it's like a tent, like a camping tent. Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah. So
sleeping.
he had
Okay,
it
okay.
set up. Yeah, the guy had it set up because we're right under the 400 South
Yeah.
freeway
So
or
you probably get a lot of
viaduct
homeless
there, and
people
so,
through there.
Yeah,
and,
it's a nice shady spot.
Yeah.
Probably have a lot of really good stories.
Yeah, there are a few.
Sounds like we just heard one, Chrissy.
No, that's a great story.
Let's I always like to ask, there's a few Salt Lake City related questions I like to ask on the podcast as we kind of wind it down. If somebody was visiting here, is there like one or two things you would say, hey, go check this out if you're going to come to town?
Well, I think if you're coming to Salt Lake, you really have to get up into the canyons and really take a hike and just look over the city, and it's just so beautiful. And there's not that many places like this in the U.S., where you can be in the city and have all these things that a city offers, but then walk up the hill a ways and then just take a deep breath and look over and see it, just forever. And it's breathtaking. And I think there's a really great underground culture here. There's a lot of art. There's a lot of great food. A lot of people. There's this underbelly of this pioneer spirit that I love about Utah and Salt Lake City in general. And if you look for it, you don't have to look too hard. And you're just going to find just amazing people doing amazing things.
Yeah, I lived in Big Cottonwood Canyon for a number of years. And I think there's no other place where you can, within 20 minutes of downtown, you can get up into a great hike. The outdoor, you can go for a bike ride. When I first moved back here in 1989, there were not very many bike trails. And now there are bike trails, and it's just expanding. Just even taking a bike ride on Jordan Parkway, or, getting on a bike and going up into Mill Creek or Big Cottonwood. There's some amazing, dirt bike trails. There's great road bike. Even taking the bike trail up the Legacy Highway up towards Lagoon. I mean, you can bike for hours and miles and miles. It's a great place. I think that's why I enjoyed coming back here and stayed, was that there's so much to do. Skiing in the winter and hiking in the summer, bike riding, kayaking, boating, fishing. It's endless. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things. It's so accessible in Salt Lake City.
One or two favorite local eating spots from each of you? I'm sure you got at least one. You mentioned Alberto's earlier. I don't know if we got that on the recording, but
I gotta think
that's
about
that's
that.
a local place that's good.
Omar's, that used to be in Sugar House.
Yeah,
it's
Rautopia, yeah.
And actually, it turns out that Omar and I worked on a project. I didn't know him then, but in Hawaii.
Really?
And one of the reasons why, if you ever go to Omar's, ask him how he got into the restaurant business, because he had an epiphany on Kaho'olawe in Hawaii. And he and I were both working on that project, and it turned out that my brother was as well, all at different times. So
that's so wild.
Yeah. So Omar's, I feel nurtured. I feel loved. I feel incredibly healthy. Walking in and walking out, I'm a better person.
I still got to take Chrissy there. Great place. Omar was one in my early days of doing this podcast. Him and I were in touch. I don't know what happened, but he was supposed to come and do the podcast.
Well, contact him again.
Yeah. Reach out to him again. Did you have one or two or place?
My family loves Sapa.
Oh yeah.
It's just a staple. It's consistent. It's great. Their sushi is amazing.
Anything else you want to ask Chrissy before I want, the information before we wrap up? And obviously we want contact information, website, all that. Again, that will be on our show notes for this episode.
Yeah, could you each give us one piece of advice to leave with our listeners?
Do what you love passionately and don't look back. Just keep going.
I think failure is the best place to learn. And so if you can be comfortable with failing, I think it's the igniter for your life, and not being afraid of that.
And what's the let's run down how people can get a hold of you guys, website.
The phone number that we publish is mine, and that's 801-598-3749. Our website is meanmugspottery.com. And our email address, is info@meanmugs with an S, MEANMUGS pottery.com, all one word. And then you can find us on Facebook. Our Facebook is Mean Mugs Pottery, and then Instagram is Mean Mugs Pottery Co.
And I'll double check all those and again put the correct links at imsaltlake.com with this episode. I've had a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming and doing the podcast.
Yes, thank you guys.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Guys.
Thank you.
You
this
bet.
is just delightful.
And I always tell people, let's catch up down the road.
Absolutely.
For sure.
All right.
Let's make some mugs.
Let's make some I Am Salt Lake mugs.
We would love to. I love your logo.
Many thanks again to Jessica and Judy for joining us on this episode of the podcast and sharing their story. You guys can head on over to our website at imsaltlake.com/337 for all the links and to get in touch with them and find out more about Mean Mugs.
Seriously, reach out to Jessica and Judy. Let them know you heard them on I Am Salt Lake podcast. And maybe have some mugs of, like, if you have a business or a podcast or something.
These mugs are so cool. I actually want to start collecting them.
Hey, don't forget to visit our website at imsaltlake.com. This is where you can dig through the entire back catalog of episodes. This is where you can share your favorite episodes with your family and friends on social media. We also have an event calendar on there on the website. A lot of people don't know about this. Click on the events tab, and this will tell you about everything going on in Salt Lake City. Your concerts, your networking events, your parties, just get-togethers. Go check out this event calendar at imsaltlake.com.
And many thanks again to our sponsors for this episode: Five Wives Vodka, Product Power Up, and Market Source Real Estate. Many thanks to Access Co-working Space for their hospitality. And most of all, thanks to you guys for coming back week after week.
You all have a great week. Get out and enjoy Salt Lake City, support local, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Good night, Grammy.